All right. Hello, hello, everybody. Welcome on in. Thanks so much for joining us today for March's CMWS webinar, Parent Engagement and Mentoring, Amplifying Parent Voice in Policy and Practice, part two of a three-part mini-series. So happy that you're here with us today. We're going to give folks another minute or two to join in, get settled. And so while you're doing that, feel free to drop in your name and where you're calling in from in the chat. Make sure to click the three dots in the chat box to make sure that you're sending it to everybody and not just us hosts and panelists. Um, but yeah, just drop your name and location in the chat just so we can get to know you a little bit more. We have a few more questions later on to see who's in the room with us. But for now, while we're waiting, yeah, awesome. Kayla, thanks for kicking us off. Aaron from Portland, awesome. If you are just joining in, welcome to today's webinar, Parent Engagement and Mentoring, Amplifying Parent Voice in Policy and Practice, part two of a three-part series. My name is Jake Sullivan. I am the Training Delivery Manager with Mentor National. Happy to be here with you all today for this really great conversation. And again, part two of three parts. So if you haven't seen the first one, definitely go back and check that out on our website. And then our next one will give you some details, but that'll be happening next month. Awesome, awesome. I'm seeing everybody drop your names and locations in the chat. I'm seeing so much representation from all over the country. New York City, Arkansas, Michigan. Perfect. Oh, we got Canada. We got our international representation. Love to see it. Awesome. Heather and Lori, both from California. Thanks for being here. Great. All right. Just because we have a really packed discussion and some activities for you all to do, I don't want to spend too much more time in this little intro part. But again, huge welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll dive right in for some tips for engagement. So you're all already doing it in terms of using the chat. So continue to introduce yourselves throughout the webinar, talk with one another, share resources, and respond to the presenters, of course. You can also do that using the emoji option on the toolbar. Also use the Q&A box. We'll have some time at the end of the webinar specifically for audience questions. So put any questions that you have for our presenters there so that we have them all organized when the time comes. And then if you haven't already, feel free to enable captions by, again, going to that toolbar and clicking the CC button on your screen to provide captions. The webinar is recorded, and we'll send that out with any resources that we mentioned today, as well as the slides in about 1 week, and it'll also be posted to our website. So with that, I will pass it over to our facilitator for today's webinar, Jerry Shirk.
Okay, thanks so much, Jake. And it is great to see so many people from all over the United States and Canada. Again, my name is Jerry Shirk. I'm with the California Mentoring Partnership. I come to you from Encinitas, California, down by San Diego. I will actually have a minor role on the webinar today, mainly as the moderator, because we have three special panelists today who are the experts on engaging parents. And want to let you know before I get into introducing folks that this is the second of a three-part series. And there you have it up on the slides. We did parent engagement, strengthening mentoring through partnership. Um, and it was actually in February. And then policy and practice shaping systems for family engagement is today. And then the third part, research and findings, will be on April 24th. So I want to begin by introducing Dr. Crystal Jackson. You can see her impressive bio as an education leader, a professor, founder of a nonprofit up there on the slide. Um, Her nonprofit supports foster youth, and she's a champion of diversity. I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Jackson on the EPOC group, Engaging Parents of Color, which you'll hear more about today. And I've learned the name that she is known to her friends really sums up her personality. She is known as Action Jackson, uh, a person who gets things done. So we're so happy to have her here today. And the next person is Hank Roberts. Hank is a friend. I've had the privilege of working with him for several years. He's the founder of a nonprofit called Peacemakers, and he works in the school system providing direct services in Richmond, California. And you can see his impressive bio, so I won't read through it, but I want to let you know that he left a successful sales job at 3M because he wanted to make a difference with our youth, and he is making a difference. I've had the pleasure of working with him on the California Mentoring Partnership for the past 4 years or so, and he brings a wealth of knowledge and energy and credibility to our group. So I now turn it over to Hank, and Hank is going to do a couple introductions. And Hank, you need to unmute.
Button will not let me do it. Anyway, it's really my pleasure to be here with you all this afternoon or morning, depending upon where you are. It's difficult to describe Jerry Shirk. I mean, in case you didn't know, he was an outstanding defensive lineman in the NFL. I bet you didn't know that, but I bet you do know that Jerry is now defending and fighting against injustice and unfair treatment of all humans. If you really want to figure out who Jerry is, take some time and read up on this guy by the name of Marfield Story. And Marfield Story was a founder, or one of the founders, if you will, of the NAACP. Check him out. It is also my pleasure to introduce Zalon Harrison. If you're looking for the modern version of a civil rights activist that drives with the spirit of names that you know, it's no doubt you're talking to the spirit of Harriet Tubman and Fannie Lou Hamer. That's deep indwelled into the spirit of Zalon. That's who she represents. So it's really my pleasure to introduce those two individuals as we move on to the next slide.
So today we have our first poll question. I think it's always interesting to see who is with us today, who is in the house. And so Jake booted up the poll. So please go ahead and answer, and we'll give you the results in a moment. And this actually kind of helps the panelists shape their responses. That my guess is that there's probably more program staff than anybody else, but it's always interesting to see. So wait for Jake to give the results. Mentoring program staff almost 70%. National or affiliate organizational staff 8%. Mentors, great. There's good, almost 10% of mentors in the house. Then educators, TA providers, researchers, and other 10%. Okay, so we have one more poll. Being that this is engaging parents of color, we thought it would be appropriate to see who you identify as. Do you identify as BIPOC, white, another identity, or prefer not to say? In our last webinar, we had talked about how most program staff are white, and very often the majority of mentees and their families are people of color. And that's why we're having these webinars. So it's going to be interesting to see what the actual breakdown is. And we're doing these polls also. We did the last webinar, and one area that we thought we could do a little bit better was engaging the audience. So we're going to have several polls all the way through. Okay, so it's pretty even. It's BIPOC is 42% and white is 51. Another identity is 5%. Prefer not to say 2%, but still there are a lot of white staff who are serving BIPOC populations. Um, and I'm going to turn over to Hank. Do you have any comment on this breakdown? And I'll turn you loose to give your part of the presentation, Hank. And you're muted.
I'm ready to go.
Okay. Any thoughts on the breakdown? It was pretty close to 50-50.
I thought it was pretty interesting. And I mean, maybe that's a reality check that we may be moving towards in the mentoring field.
Okay, next slide, and Hank's going to talk about transformation, so take it away.
Transformation. And you'll listen to this word and hear it a lot throughout the day, because today is really about transformation. And what does transformation in a simple terminology mean? It's really a radical change. It means it can no longer be business as usual. I mean, transformation is really the essence of our conversation today. So as I reflect back on the last webinar, it was clear there was no mystery as to why this radical transformation needed to happen. It was no mystery, but the revelations really came, and again, at the last webinar when we looked at history. So let's look, let's take a recap and visit the last slides around why. So where are we now? And just to remind you, as you look at this slide, we're talking about 160 years have passed from slavery to today. And look at the statistics of our students. Blacks still represent the highest suspensions in the nation. Blacks still represent the highest attendance, or the lowest attendance, if you will, in the nation. And we still have the poorest academic performance in the nation. This is 160 years later, so it's no mystery. History is a real, true revelations. But let's remind ourselves that in this window of time, there was some major changes that should have caused some changes in these outcomes. If you remember Brown versus Board, 1954. If you recall, there was a Civil Rights Act in 1964. And we know those were designed to create equality. But somewhere in the midst of all of those timelines that I just shared, Jim Crow did not end until 1965. Voting rights was not a valid option until 1965 for all people. So in reality, we were still segregated. And if you notice also, and I'll move quickly in this slide, you see no indications of reformation. You see no indications of reconciliation, no indications of healing, because there was so much trauma in this time period. And that trauma, unfortunately, is likely with us today. Let's see. So let's take a deeper dive and see if there are some other realities that are impacting the mystery that you see now unfolding. Before we look at the mystery, let me be clear that and this is it's sad to say, but the media wealth for whites is 250,000. The media wealth for blacks and people of color is 27,000. Look at the major disparity between the two. So it's no mystery that something has to change. So can we say that America, the land of the brave and the home of the free, is really a place for all to have opportunity. But yet when we look at generational poverty, we have to question if that's true. We know that some of those young people we saw that had those issues on that prior slide, maybe they couldn't be successful in football or basketball, and maybe that's why they ended up in juvenile hall. I'm just saying. And maybe because there's a lack of a lack of wealth, those children you saw on the last slide are struggling to maintain health because the disparities and the challenges of health in our epoch youth is the highest in obesity, diabetes, and other chronic diseases. But what's even more sad to say, and maybe not, but maybe so, is there a relationship between those young people who we saw on the last slide that are struggling? Could it be those were some of the same children who are part of this devastating statistics that says that firearms remain the leading cause of death for children and teenagers, and it's disproportionately affecting people of color? Could there really be a relationship to what we just saw and what's happening today? That's what we need to discover as we continue along the way. Next slide. So one of the most powerful ways to see where we go is that I wanted to ask if in some kind of way, how is your program, how could your program go and grow in regards to supporting parent voice? What is it? What is it? What is one way that your program could grow in regards to supporting parent voice? Next slide.
Actually, Hank, I think we're going to be waiting for the results on that. And I think Jake is going to put that in the cloud, so we're going to be able to see that on our screen in a moment.
And you see, I'm ready to go. I'm so ready to get to the next slide.
So here's some responses, Hank.
Hmm. Why don't you go ahead and read those, Jerry, and I can digest them as you read them.
Okay. So the question is, what is one way you and your program could grow in regards to supporting parent and caregiver voice? And kind of probably the unsaid thing is for, for parents of color, instilling parental cafes. So maybe coffee classes, huh? Calling home, asking about the young person's strength, following through with monthly check-ins, language support. Yeah, I know a program recently, they say their entire program changed and they're serving a lot of Latinx children, and they got some staff that spoke Spanish, and their program completely changed. The programs are calling them for advice, and they're really close to their parents. Some more responses, easy to read, to the point emails, great. Coffee hours, caregiver surveys, continue to encourage their feedback as much as possible, inviting them to participate into activities, more partnership, family dinner nights. And Jake, if you'd scroll up.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
And I won't continue to read, but let's just take a few seconds to
really
take
good.
all these in. So these are great suggestions. And some of these that you're doing, some of these you'll look at for the first time and get ideas.
Those are great.
One in the
Those
right-hand corner asking for more feedback is really important. Wonder if there's a way that we can capture these and then have them on the like the handouts. I hope so.
Yeah, I'll make sure
Maybe we
to
could take screenshots to make sure that they go in the handouts.
Yeah, I'll make sure to share out these PDFs with everybody afterwards as well, so folks have all these ideas. And we'll be using this Mentimeter for a couple other activities later on, so I'll have the QR code up again on the side later, but also feel free to use this same link and keep this open on your phone or your laptop because we have a
Great. Okay, those are wonderful.
really
Let's
outstanding.
next slide.
Next slide, please.
It's taking Jake just a second.
Yeah, I get that. So now that we've gotten somewhat of a perspective of how those questions were posed and answered, let's hear the voice of a parent. And we're asking the transparency of this parent to really share what barriers do parents of color experience within mentoring programs. And I want us to really listen carefully to the voice of this parent so that we can really dive deeper and connect the dots going forward.
Hi, I'm Zalon Harrison. I think some of the barriers, if you attended the first webinar, I might have shared this story. My first experience with mentoring was I was a young mother, and my oldest son received a mentor from a mentor or organization, and my partner was incarcerated. And when he came home, they canceled my son's mentor service. And so I was like, why did that happen? And that to me was like something I felt was disservice to me and my child, because my child still needed that resource and that service. So looking at barriers to mentoring, we're looking at how organizations operate. Why do they operate the way they operate? Giving parents looking at the whole child. How is the child in the home? And is that mentoring service program set up and structured to continue the services however the child is in their home and in their community? So I feel that organizations, when they're creating how they're going to interact with families, looking at the whole child is the best practice for parents, and looking at how sometimes your policies can create barriers to supporting families if they're not within that structure, they're not considered that ideal client. So making sure that if there isn't any policies, that you look at things, what could be in place to really support the community, the people that we're serving, and be effective to meet our goals. So that would be my response to number one.
And then Hank, I think there's a question number 2.
Let's take a look at number 2. What do parents of color imagine is the ideal partnership with mentoring programs? Wow. Imagine. Let's see. Let's hear.
An ideal partnership would look like, what parents want to do is a partnership that we communicate with each other. We have a lot of transparency, a lot of understanding there that any relationship needs to thrive, but including what's the center of the work is the child. And then it would help with the parents to have clear ideas of what is this relationship about. Like, why is this mentor here? Are you here just to do math with my child? Are you here just to work on some social emotional things with my child? Like having that clear understanding and sometimes revisiting it again, because the lines can get blurred sometimes, especially when as humans we seek to connect with each other. So making sure those lines stay clear is very helpful, but I think everybody included. And I think just making sure that the parent is, if you have things that are in place where it says, oh, we don't really talk to parents, we really don't engage parents, that partnership, especially when you have children with off-track behavior, that partnership with that parent can sometimes help with those type of areas when the mentor doesn't try to take it all, like, oh, because I have this and that, the parent doesn't need to be involved. So that ideal would be to always keep that triangle going on with the parent, the mentor, and the child or the youth, to be all involved for success.
Wow. Well said. Well said. I trust that when we look at the parent voice and we think about what that challenge or what those challenges were, that we can move on now to the next slide. So all of us are not excluded from this topic called implicit bias. We honestly were all children at some point in our lives. And we were given or shared or just basically without a choice information that perhaps was not necessarily rooted in facts. And that information came from our upbringing, family, a social environment, cultural messages. And what's not listed, it obviously came from history. But all of us have implicit biases. So maybe because all of us do have implicit biases, and particularly those who 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 may be deemed children of those who were taught to be slave masters, maybe, and just think about this, maybe the Jim Crow laws never really went away because they are in our subconscious each and every day. Just maybe. Think about that. Maybe they never really went away. Next slide. So why don't we stop here and take a minute and participate in this implicit bias poll, and let's see what kinds of outcomes and what kinds of responses we get that perhaps could be interesting for us to see why we're going forward. So Jake, could you set that up for us, please?
So it should just launch on everybody's screen. And just a reminder for these questions, each question is not necessarily is not what you think. It's have you heard a mentor or program staff member express these opinions? So it's not your own opinion. It's have you heard someone talking about this or insinuating these ideas? And there should be 4 different polls for you to answer. So we'll give you about maybe 45 seconds to a minute or so more to look through all of those.
And please be as transparent as you can. The clock is ticking.
Thinking I'll give about 15 seconds more. So get in your answers if you can, and then we'll close and share out the results.
And Jerry, as my colleague in this battle that we're fighting, I want you to share out what you see so I can perceive in my head what it means to me.
Okay. Well, we're waiting for the results. I spoke to it last time, but there, when I started out helping mentoring programs around the mid '90s, there was a saying that involved parents, and it was be cordial but stay distant. And we found that to be an untruth in the mentoring world that you really do need to engage parents. So this is interesting. Have you ever heard of mentor program or program staff express there must be something wrong with people that live in the poverty level? So 34% say yes, 58 no, unsure 9. The next question, it's best to avoid caregivers that have a hidden addiction or who have had an addiction or mental health issues. 38% say yes. So that's a big number. It's best to avoid parents who have been incarcerated. 22% say yes. Caregivers from families with a lot of challenges don't want to be involved with their child's mentoring program. So this is the highest. And actually, there was a person that asked this question in the last webinar, or actually made a comment that they'd heard some people say that parents that have a lot of chaos in the family don't love their children as much as as they should. So that's a big number, 63%. Uh, Caregivers from families with a lot of challenges don't want to be involved with their child's mentoring programs, almost 2/3. So very interesting. Those are interesting numbers to look at. And as Hank is making the point, a lot of this comes from implicit or unconscious bias. Take it away, Hank.
Next slide. I'm sure that all of us have heard something about or heard something related to systemic institutional racism. And basically, when we think about what it is, it's and it's really deeply embedded when you think about it. It's deeply embedded in our systems of all these different entities that you see listed. The systems are based upon those laws that are written or unwritten, policies that are practiced that creates a disadvantage for certain groups of people. And it's so normal that most of us don't even realize that it exists. And so maybe the Jim Crow laws have never went away. Because remember, they're deeply embedded in our subconscious. And we have the opportunity to practice what's in our subconscious in the policies and laws of systemic institutional racism every day. So when you think about, again, maybe Jim Crow hasn't really went away, because if it's still in our subconscious and we have an opportunity to practice it in the confines of systemic institutional racism, then could that be the reason why we still have a divide? And what's critical when you look at this list of systems and institutions, look at the last one, education and mentoring. Education and mentoring is the most pivotal systems among all the systems, because whatever happens in education, whatever happens in mentoring, significantly impacts the life of our children who grow up and have to function in these other systems. So there is a radical need for change because the responsibilities are so high, the stakes are so high that we must look at this different and teach people how to survive. Next slide. Could because America is the land of the brave and the home of the free, is it really a chance for everyone to experience equal opportunity? Given systemic institutional racism, can we still say that's true? Because let's look at some of the consequences that our parents must endure. Just look at them real quickly. Because of systemic institutional racism, it's not uncommon to not feel welcome. It's not uncommon to feel that you're to blame, that you're facing barriers that affect your abilities to help your child. You have so many negative experiences in the institutions. Your cultural values and communication styles is dismissed. And most importantly, you experience power imbalances that makes you feel unheard. And the challenges also is around language barriers. Deep exclusion is there. When we talk about the gaps in language, there's a fear of disclosure because you might use this against me. because you're going to follow the laws and the policies of systemic institutional racism. And here's sadly and lastly, I'm left out of the decisions. I have no voice. I'm not included. Consequences of racism in relationship to parent engagement. Next slide. So could those consequences, when we don't understand, really are representations of what is going on in those children and families of color that we're serving? And again, this is not exclusively saying no one else does, but we're talking about now specifically engaging parents of color who are often left out. So do we always never dismiss the fact, or do we think about the possibilities that there could be issues that are not common to our issues? And here is a list of many of the challenges that they are facing. Maybe some of us can relate to those challenges, maybe many of us cannot, but these are common denominators of struggle. So is America really the land of the brave and the home of the free? Is it really the place where everybody have equal opportunity? Let's see. Next slide. So the hardest and most difficult reality that we have is to be willing, and you've heard people say this all the time, to be willing to look at you. When we point fingers, it's always coming back to us. Are we willing to look at who? Look at you, and perhaps see how you may be playing into the game of the old Jim Crow law that's been modernized and hypnotizing to you today. And that's called systemic institutional racism. Because as I recall, we talked about innocent children who are trained by their adults to be slave masters. And I wonder if those today, I wonder if those innocent children today are being trained to practice systemic institutional racism, which takes us back to where we began. So we have to take some time and really look in that mirror and begin to examine, where do I fit? What role do I play? And so the very first and most important thing that we have to do when we talk about perceived program negative ideas and moving into a place of real transformation, we have to change the way we think. And I'm speaking to myself, because if you really look at how we have been programmed and trained to think, there's only one human race. So what's this notion about the blacks, the whites, the browns, the reds? There's really only one human race. And so that's the first beginning of change, is that humans look out for humans. Humans support humans. Humans make sure that humans' needs are met by those who can meet those needs of those humans. So we have to begin to change the way we think. And we have to be willing to take a deeper dive to recognize, how is my family? How is my environment? How is history? How is the media? How are these variables affecting who I am? And that's a very difficult task, I'm speaking for myself, to dissect and go back and then come forward to understand how I became who I was and how I became who I am today. But that's the beginning of change. And we have to be willing to take that deeper dive in order to be free. So what do you mean, Hank? What is all this really adding up to? It's first of all, we don't really understand true history of our country. we're never really given the full depths of what truth really is. And I'll give you a good example. Everybody probably have likely maybe heard of Thomas Edison, I'm sure, who invented the light bulb. And again, this is history. But do you know someone by the name of Louis Latimer, a Black man who altered the carbon fiber of the light bulb so that we can have a bulb that burns for 300 hours? That's another example, an easy example of not knowing our history. And history should be inclusive of all of us so that we can all be free. And classism, I'm jumping to that because there was a time in history when it was all based upon economics. And you go back further into history and you'll see that you can be Black and still be considered white because of your economical status. So we got to get away. We have to get away from the way we've been trained to be free, so that America really can be a place called the land of opportunity for all of us. Let's take that look in the mirror and let's see, so that all of us can be free. Next slide. And once we take that step and we become free, the first thing that you'll acknowledge is you clearly understand that there's a difference between parent involvement and parent engagement. That's when you see your mind is shifting, because when you say parent involvement, there's already a premeditated idea of what that parent's role will be in that relationship with that child. And if that parent's role is simply to drop the child off and goodbye, that's involvement. But when you make that transformation based on that last slide, you know that it's parent engagement. That now you see the power of partnerships, the power of working together, because we realize that parents bring a deep knowledge and a sincere lived experience because they know their child. They know more about their child than you do. But the most important thing is, by making them a part of the partnership and using your skills, you've created the we concept, which is true parent engagement. And imagine how this child feels seeing a unified team. So he's not caught between what the mentor thinks and what the parent thinks. There's no competition in misunderstandings of what values are, because those values will be understood and worked through when there's a team. But out of all the things that we talk about and all the things we do, when you become free, based on the last slide, if you remember, when you become free, then parents don't want to know what you know, but they want to know you care. And so you move from knowing everything to now caring, because you've gone through a transformation in the first big step to be free. Next slide. It doesn't matter what we say or do, given what's been said. And so you say, well, Hank, what are you talking about? That doesn't make sense. You can individually move from a reformation to a transformation, but it's stabilizing and stability that's going to really make this work. And so reconciliation circles is the ultimate way to move to a place of freedom for all of us. Imagine if we had reconciliation circles that I want to talk about, and you'll see why, 100 years ago. Because reconciliation circles is a place where those who have been harmed are now in a setting with those who are harmed and who have committed the harm, can now establish a clear understanding of how they can move forward and heal. I know this is difficult because we can say, well, that was a long time ago. But think about those innocent children a long time ago who no one has never really given them an opportunity to be free. And so we need to make sure that we can stand in their behalf in a circle of those who represent those innocent children to be able to help them be free through forgiveness, through understanding to those that were harmed. And then those that were harmed are in a position to receive the forgiveness so that it becomes a consummated agreement that we're now humans working together. And I know this sounds difficult because we've never really done this before. This country has never come to this reconciliation deep dive. But that reconciliation circle is where we begin to deep dive into understanding what systemic institutional racism really is. That deep dive in reconciliation helps us understand what really and how come implicit bias still really exists. So it's necessary that I believe that as a mentoring organizations and as in partnership with the educational system, with teachers, for example, that we begin to take the lead. Because remember, we're the ones that can change the dynamics in all the other systems. So I believe it's our time to take the lead and show the rest of the systems the power of reconciliation. And here's why it can't be just for staff. Because if staff understands that systemic institutional racism and implicit bias still has a struggle within them, how do you communicate with staff at a management level when you still are not free? And how do you, as one that's in leadership, how do you communicate to management and staff if you also are not free? So in order for this transformation to go from the worm, if you will, through the metamorphosis and become that butterfly that's free, all the interesting components of the organization must experience the same metamorphosis so that all of you are free. So I'm encouraging, stressing the importance of reconciliation so America can be the land of the brave and the home of the free. And all of us can really say we're experiencing equality. It's in some ways, as I come to the end of this, in some ways it's in our hands. Because we are the systems, as we begin to understand, can show the way. And so I urge all of us today, as we continue to move forward, to be authentic and realize it's time for change. No longer can we be in a reformation, we must move to a transformation. And in closing, we're going to hear more about policies and practice, which is important. But just remember, as we get to this slide, just remember policies and practice is simply an exercise if your mind has not been transformed, if you've not gone through that metamorphosis of change. So once you've gone through that metamorphosis of change, and you clearly have made that key transformation, then the collaboration with parents now begins to make sense. So the basics beginnings is to be prepared. And this is an interesting one real quickly. Being prepared is knowing that you're going to have care. I'm caring. I have a caring spirit. I know why I'm doing this. I no longer have this implicit bias that's still holding me back. So I can really care. And then looking at it from a basic approach of responsibilities, get to know facts, honest facts about those that you are serving. So that your care can go and expand beyond just the child, as you'll see as we get to the end of this. And always make your first call the best call. Because when you call and say we, you've already experienced inclusivity. But when you call and say I, you separated the relationship from the beginning. So it's always we, and we has to be a good news call. What is it that you can say that's good? I'm calling you because I care. I'm calling you because I honestly care. And then when you look at scheduling, it's not always about what's best for you. We only can meet at 5 o'clock. But when you go to the metamorphosis and you begin to see the reason for change, then you're more accommodating to say, well, what time is best for us? We, what's good for us? Remember, it becomes a we in the collaboration. And in any kind of collaboration where there's a partnership, there's always an opportunity to share questions and concerns, so that both parties feel that they are in a partnership. There's no need to exercise language barriers when you know that may be an issue. So you don't beat people up with Western words that they don't understand, because then they don't know how to respond. And I know that sounds a little awkward, a little strange for me to say that. But oftentimes, the language barrier is not because they speak Spanish and you speak English. It's your choice of words that alienate people to never know or don't understand what you have to say. But most importantly, we want to be good listeners. That's why you want the parent to talk, so that you can hear what their needs and concerns are as you begin to bridge the partnership. And then as you begin to moving along real swiftly, you begin to really create some action items, and you start developing an action plan. Let me remind you, in your action plan, you also want to be clear about what you don't do. And that means you're not a babysitter. You're not an ATM machine. You're not an Uber driver or a transportation vehicle ready and available at all times. So even as you look at how you're going to work together, you also have to be clear about what you do and do not do. Very, very important. When you start looking at your action plan, you also want to remind yourself that even when you can buy anything for a child, make sure it's a we, including the parent. Because what we don't want is to create this, that Mr. Johnson, he bought me this, and now the mother feels or father feels excluded. So that's why you want to have a partnership where you agree on how you even go through the process of doing some of those things we're talking about. And here's what's really important if as we get to the end of this: gain community partners. You don't have to be the one to do it all. Develop partnerships, critical. If we're all humans working together, we must develop partnerships. That's where real transformation takes place, is developing those partnerships. And when you develop those partnerships, now you're embracing what communities can do that supports you. Maybe you discover this family has an issue with food. Where's the nearest food bank? So it calls for us to move beyond the norm, because what we're dealing with is beyond the norm. So we have to go from a reformation to a transformation. And as best you can, involve the schools so that you can create that triangular partnership between the parent, the teacher, the mentor, the child. What a powerful partnership. And lastly, let's make sure we do follow-ups, do assessments. That's important. Constant communication, letting parent know what's going on, what's happening. And this has always been helpful. I don't want to exclude it because I know someone probably say, what about home visits? Always a great gift. But if you're not comfortable, partner with someone else. But I guarantee you, as you build those relationships, the home visits get a lot easier. Because there's never a concern that you might be calling CPS. I'm just being transparent as we go through this process. So I'm at the end of where I want to be, but I hope we've come together and see the reality of why a reformation is not what we need. It's a transformation, radical transformation. And it shouldn't begin next week. It should begin now in the way we think, change in our minds. Next slide, and I'm done. So I'm going to now move it to my colleague in resolution, Dr. Crystal Jackson. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Dr. Jackson, please unmute and take it away.
Good morning, good afternoon. Greetings from whichever area in the country that you're in. Today, I'm going to dive into the policy framework for family engagement. Next slide, please. What are some examples of policies that may hinder or prevent parent engagement? Take a few moments to respond to this question as we dive deeper into this portion of our presentation today.
Dr. Jackson, I'm wondering, while people are putting in their responses, we're a little bit behind, so thought I would ask the first question, and maybe you or Zalan could jump in there while we're finishing up this poll. There's a question by one person about how to engage parents in school-based programs where the current policy is just to get sign-offs from the parents, and that's just about it. And I do know that a lot of schools really, that have mentoring programs within the schools that are run from outside of the schools, especially don't want mentor parent contact. And so I know, Zalan, that you've probably experienced this, and you probably have opinion. I'd like to hear from both you and Dr. Crystal Dr. Jackson, while the poll is forming up.
Zalan, I'll yield to you first, and then I'll go ahead and continue from there.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, those policies are a lot of times in place because, I think from a parent's perspective, it's like, oh, you want to just control the environment with not too much input. But I think one of your points earlier is like when you don't have that input in the policy or that relationship and connection, the child is observing who the parent is interacting with, right? So that can also create a barrier for your program, because the child sees, oh, you're not talking to my parents, or my care provider, so I can have this relationship with you and then have this relationship over here with, and it's like, if there's definitely, when it becomes with all children, there comes that time where there may be an issue, you don't have that relationship to come to a resolution. So it's like that can create barriers for your whole program, not having that parent inclusiveness, or not even having a lane. You can have a family night, like some of the suggestions that were there, just once a year, your program year, just to have little information about success, have talent show, whatever you guys do, just have, if you don't want to, like say your organization won't do it on a daily basis, but have those moments and gaps in there that you can fill in with saying hi, at least putting a parent and a child's face together. Things are youth putting their faces together. It doesn't take a lot of effort, but creating policies so if you're gone, someone else can still keep the work going, and the parents and the families can get some consistency with your program with engagement. I'm complete there.
Great, thank you. And
Okay.
Dr. Crystal, feel free to respond to that, or just go ahead and more or less moderate the examples of policies that may hinder or prevent parent engagement.
Yeah, sometimes policies are put in place, but sometimes we fail to understand that as the parent, as the stakeholder, we have more power than we actually realize. So I see in here mandated reporting, policies on practice around collecting data and sensitive information, school-based programs, choices, students instead of families opting in, policies around incarcerated parents, punitive policies that limit or wear down the parents. Well, we can go ahead and move to the next slide, where I'm talking about the framework and legislation, providing a comprehensive overview of key legislative framework that champion family engagement. ESSA, which is Every Student Succeeds Act, Individual and Disability Act. This is put into place. A lot of parents don't understand, or maybe they do understand. I don't want to insult anyone in this conversation, that in Title I, Part A, schools are receiving funds and they must develop and implement these types of strategies for meaningful communication with families in the language that a parent can understand. I noticed that that was something that was said earlier in the slides when Hank was presenting parent and family engagement policies. Once again, schools are required to create and distribute a written policy regarding parental involvement, outlining how families can participate in school activities and decisions. I have been a parent for many years. One thing that I can tell you is I was one of those parents that stayed in the handbook. I was the questioner as why am I not seeing this happen within the school system? Why am I not seeing that happen within the school system? One of the things that we as parents, we as humans, the organizations that are providing these services, that we have to understand is we do have a lot of power. And if you are not seeing these programs, PTA programs, school parent compact, where they must collaborate with parents to develop a compact and outlining shared responsibilities for the improvement of student academic achievement. Because at the end of the day, this is what we all want, is to see improvement for the student, also providing the services and making it inclusive to the parent, because it goes hand in hand. If the parent, which is our stakeholder, is involved and we're providing those services to the student and as well as the parent, then everyone succeeds. So when you are also talking about the different provisions for family engagement, and you talk about procedural safeguards and access to educational records, independent evaluations, and the ability and challenges and the decisions through due process. Those are things that are not explained when you come into these circles, and you're expected to know these things. But oftentimes, next slide, oftentimes this is not what is happening. So those collaborative partnerships will get, what will happen with those things, they're built to gain the mutual respect and the understanding. Schools are encouraged to respect and value the diverse perspectives and the insights that the family will bring to the educational process. This is two-way communication. It opens the channels of communication, and it helps build that trust. Trust was one of the things that I also saw in the slides and in the cloud earlier in the conversation that Hank was having. If you don't have that trust and that two-way communication piece that is put into this, then the programs are not successful. It's not successful on the school or district end. Therefore, the parent does not feel that, why should I engage into these programs? These programs are not built for me. It's not built for my child to succeed. It's not built to give me further understanding. Because sometimes, they just say, I'm pretty sure you've heard, oh, the parent doesn't care, or the parent is not engaged. Sometimes it is purely based upon communication. So by us establishing the legislative framework, it will provide the foundation for engaging families as active parents in their educational journey with their children, which ultimately promotes equity and improving the outcome for all students. So now we're going to talk a little bit about district policies, because most of these things that you are seeing or things that you have heard, these mentoring programs are coming through the district. Districts must have policies. So therefore, in order for the mentorship program to be effective, they have to understand the district policies. So it has to be consistency across the schools. Policies ensure that the family engagement efforts are consistent across all schools and a unified approach to foster collaboration between families and the educational staff. So you have to build an inclusive culture, have a welcoming environment, policies that emphasize inclusivity, creating a welcoming environment for all families, regardless of your background, your culture, or your socioeconomic status. None of those things should be relevant when it comes to actively having a prosperous, and I'm not talking about financially speaking, but for the parent and the student, for you to have that successful investment, you need to understand all of those guiding principles. This will help build the trust and encourage active participation. At this time, I'm going to yield to Zalon to come in and speak about her experience with district policies. As we move to the next slide, we can move to the next slide while she talks about this.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Yeah, so some of you may partner with school districts, some of you may work outside the school district. But when you look at district policies, you want to look at your district policy and see how your mentor program is written in their district policy. A lot of the times they're in there. There are districts in our state that does have policies around mentoring. And how does that, their family and community engagement policies look? Because these policies affect how you can operate and how you can work, or you can look at what's missing there and see what maybe you need to go to the board or talk to your superiors to see what need to be put, what should be put in place so that you all can have a better cohesive relationship with the parents and with the school and with the student, as the youth, has a lot of components and they're just like this child, bobbling around in this, and the district policies may be preventing you from having these closer and more, I say, transparent relationships, because the policies can sometimes say, like Jerry stated, it could say, oh, well, you just, meet them one time and that's it, you're done, and we don't do anymore. And the mentoring gold policy may have stated that you're supposed to enhance relationships. So if where are you enhancing that relationship? And that's what we talked about earlier, about being clear about why you're servicing, what are you mentoring, what are you doing? And that helps in the policy, how districts operate their policies and how clear their policies are. Because if you got a hands-off policy, that's not going to help the youth learn how to build community, work with social emotional, if you can't help them understand a bridge through your work with them. So having policies that really work in partnership to what your organization goal is, the goal is that you see as best practice, those are the type of things we want you to walk away with, looking at frameworks of other districts. When you look at district policies for mentoring, look at district policies for parent engagement and how they can be in partnership. I'm complete.
Okay, thank you. We'll briefly talk about cultural competencies. I addressed some of this earlier. You heard a lot of this from Hank. You've seen a lot of this in the different polls that you completed today. Being competent when it comes to a culture, from a cultural perspective, this will ensure and reflect a deeper understanding and the respect for families' diverse cultural backgrounds. This approach can actually create a welcoming atmosphere, because your first line into that parent, again, we're talking about investment, that parent, the student, is understanding the respect for the cultural background. It will create that, once again, that welcoming atmosphere where families feel valued and included. Parents can easily tell when you are just checking the box for I have completed training and resources, I have the support system in place. But if those things are not actively displayed, it will be picked up on easily, and this can cause failure for your program. So next slide, we're going to move into key policies to establish. Where it talks about your eligibility criteria, your program mission statement. Whatever your program mission statement is, it should be inclusive to family, community, and partnership. So the family being the mentee, the program should prioritize supporting the family of the students that are currently enrolled into your program. Engage in a diverse group of families so you can ensure that all voices are being heard and valued. Encourage the mentees actively to participate in your programs. Share their insights. Collaborate with other mentors to enhance the students' educational experience. Move to the next slide. I'm trying to go through these quickly so that I can yield back for the sake of time. The key elements of family engagement, I think that, yes. Communication, we talked about this earlier, the two-way stream of connection channels between families and these partnerships. I call it investment and reinvestment, and what it looks like as your return on the investment. Because the investment, first and foremost, should always be that child, because you're investing in that child's future. And if the parent succeeds, the child succeeds, then the succession rate for your program will increase. The involvement in school activities, governance and decision making. When I say that, attend those board meetings. Express how you feel. Don't be afraid to express yourself. We know that you're looking for those resources, but don't be afraid to go in when you're asking, hold them accountable. Ask the questions, ask the why, the what's, the whens, the how. If you're not seeing these programs actively being used within your community. We'll move to the next slide. As I wrap up outreach strategies, application processes, mentee involvement, it also comes down to training and support for the mentors. Providing that comprehensive training and the continuous support for our mentors is central to ensuring a successful and a rewarding mentorship and experience. The program should be dedicated to equipping mentors with the KSAs, the knowledge, skill, and abilities to connect. If you can't connect with that parent and that and the student, then we won't see the students thrive, which turns into the frustration for the parent. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and yield my time back so that we can have questions. If there are questions that need to be answered, we can go ahead and do those at this time. Jerry, I yield back to you.
Yes, great. Thank you, Dr. Jackson. And Jake too, I know that you've been monitoring the chat, so if you come up with any questions, please jump in there. I think one of the main ones that's been asked a couple times is and responded to is school-based mentoring, and if the school has a policy of basically mentors see the child in the school and not the parents outside or not the child outside. And I think Zalan answered that one. There was sort of an associated question about and I think it was referring to the dilemma of school-based mentoring and the mentor being a mandated reporter. And I guess the dilemma of, reporting something that they hear from the child versus not reporting. Dr. Dusty Ann North, who's on our team, she had to leave early, but she also responded in the chat. She said some states mentors are mandated reporters. In some states, mentors are not mandated reporters. So of course, check your state statutes. So for our panelists, can you address the dilemma of mentors being mandated reporters and, some of the associated factors around that?
Jerry, I can lean into that one. I know for the state of California, and if you're dealing with the district, they are typically, they're going to want a background check, and they're going to also want you to go through, I had to go through the mandated reporter course. This is a protective layer, not only for that program. This is a protective layer for the district, whichever whichever side that you're dealing with. So, for instance, if there is something that's supposed to happen, the key that we have to take away from this is, am I just assuming that there is an issue and using some of those microaggressive terms, and have the assumption that something is going on, or am I actively seeing that there is an issue and that I must report this? So you have to be very careful when you're in those areas of being a mandated reporter. That's why they require for you to go through this training, because assumptions can be devastating to the family, because you assumed based on, it could be based on how the child is dressed. It could be based on several, like those, the implicit bias that Hank was referring to. If you're basing those things and you're going to make these reports, then social services has to in turn investigate. And those investigations can be, like I said, they can be devastating to the family. So we really have to be careful with those things. And that's why a lot of programs require mandated reporters. I yield back.
In California, they've just changed the laws a couple of years ago to make more mentors, or most mentors, mandated reporters. And as you mentioned, they do have the online training for mentors, and then also for staff. And I wanted to comment. Courtney asked a couple questions, and one was about policies and procedures. And so I responded in the chat, and over the years I've helped mentoring programs develop their policies and procedures through a document that actually Mike Geringer of Mentor was the lead author, and it's been around for about 15, 20 years, but I think it still holds up. It's called the Generic Mentoring Program Policy and Procedure Manual. So if you put those words in Google, it'll pop up, and it should be a PDF form and a digital form. And it's kind of a thing of beauty, because it's a hypothetical program. I think it's called New Visions, but if you put your program's name in and on Word document, put find and change, I think it populates your program's name 240 times. And then you go through each policy and procedure and change it specifically to your program. It has kind of like a starting point, and it goes over all the best practices: recruiting, screening, training, matching, monitoring and support, and so forth. And then Jake put some resources in the chat. He said, sending again in case you missed it, RAIN, RAIN.org, a great website to see the mandated reporting definitions and laws in your state. And let's see, Crystal says to everyone, we ask mentors to discuss their concerns with staff so we can determine how to proceed if needed. So that's in the case of mandated reporters. That's a really good policy, because you don't want to put a lot of pressure on the mentors. They haven't had a lot of training on mandated reporting. So a good policy is to always run a potential report, or any concerns that you have, through program staff. Cecilia put a lot of information in the chat. And so I'm wondering for our panelists, and we just have a couple minutes, and then we have some slides to close out the webinar. Any sort of quick final comments from our
Just
panelists?
one quick comment. I did want to weigh in a little bit on the mandated reporting, and I think it was somewhat touched on, but I think the most important thing to do is to be fact finding before you make assumptions. Try and get as much evidence and substantiate what may be a concern. And I think some of that also comes from building relationships with parents where you have the ability to have those open conversations. But I've had some experiences where we thought situations were what they were, but we found out they were not because of underlining truths that came out. So just be mindful of thorough investigations before proceeding, because some families are disrupted and the situations wasn't as critical as it appeared to be.
Also, I'd like to piggyback off of what Hank just said. Um, another thing that is key is understanding the story. Everyone has a story. If you don't invest that time in understanding the story or the component of the family, then you will make those preconceived notions. And by making those, you disconnect from the program, you disconnect from really understanding, and you could miss a key opportunity to engage with that family and potentially save that child or that parent's future.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson. Salon, any last words?
Thank you all for, coming out and learning new skills and sharing your thoughts. And I just want to let you guys know this is exciting work, and we want to see you guys come again for our next one. And we are just, here to, grow and learn with each other in this community. And as a parent, I just appreciate all you that came, and you all that's on the panel for really taking that bigger step to, get this right with each other as working together. Yeah, I'm complete.
So thank you. And thank you so much, our three panelists, our three experts, for their work in the field and what they did today in the training. And we just wanted to mention that Cecilia has a link that summarizes this training. Looks like she uses Otter AI, so she left the link there, and it'll give you a synopsis of the training. Valerie Lott said, Jerry, you mentioned another website for building a mentor program. I don't remember that. Maybe I did. But if you Google the National Mentoring Resource Center, which is part of Mentor, the National Mentoring Partnership, they have all kinds of materials for building a mentoring program. Probably the best site on the web for those types of materials. And then Jake, would you advance the slides, please, and we'll close out. How to get involved. If you want to get involved with the Engaging Parents of Color group, and we have about 10 or 12 people involved right now, just put your name in the chat, put EPOC by your name and email and put it in the chat, and you'll get on the mailing list. If you're interested in services or additional support around reconciliation circles, best practices around parent engagement, policies that promote parent engagement, contact Hank, and his email is there, and he'll probably get you involved with the EPOC group also as far as best practices. Hank does do the reconciliation circles and does a great job with it. Next slide, please. And there's some additional resources. Mentor Connector, if you want to recruit mentors. Um, there's a email for any feedback or questions at the top. There's a link for finding your local state affiliate connected with Mentor. And then the National Mentoring Resource Center, again, one of the best places to find any information on youth mentoring. And next slide, please. Please take 3 or 4 minutes to complete the anonymous survey to let us know how we did. Within a week, you'll receive an email with information on how to download slides, recording, and resources. I believe we have a blueprint for racial justice and mentoring that's going to be attached to this training. And it's a document that the EPOC group developed. And we're at 30 minutes past the hour, so we're right on time. Join us next month for the last in this series, Research and Findings, Building an Evidence-Based Approach, basically to parent engagement. Thursday, April 24th at 1 o'clock. And again, thank you so much to our panelists for all the hard work that you do every day and for the time and effort you put into this training. We thank you and hope to see you all next month.